Hello and welcome. This is a podcast explaining Ukraine by UkraineWorld.org. We are continuing our podcast about the war which Russia started against Ukraine. This series is brought to you by Internews Ukraine and Ukraine Crisis Media Center, two Ukrainian media NGOs. My name is Volodymyr Yermolenko. I am chief editor at UkraineWorld.org. We are making this podcast with Tetyana Ogarkova, who is in charge of international outreach at Ukraine Crisis Media Center. Hello, Tanya.
Hello, Volodymyr.
Before we start, let me remind you that you can support us on Patreon, patreon.com/UkraineWorld. So we're talking about the war. This episode will be focused on the recent events. Let me remind that we're trying to exchange, modify, mix the episodes about the current events with episodes about the background, the cultural, historical backgrounds of this war, of this conflict. And today we'll be talking about what is really going on the ground. And the key event is, of course, that Ukrainians hit the flagship Russian warship, which is called Moskva. Symbolically, Moskva means Moscow, and it seems that it sunk. So it was really a huge strike, right?
This is even certain at that very moment, because we know that all this happened on late night on Wednesday, and yesterday it was a kind of misunderstanding what was really happening on the ground, because certain sources were saying that it's already sank, and Pentagon was saying that it is still floating, and Russians were saying that it was still floating. But yesterday, also on Thursday night, starting from Thursday night, we were already sure, and it was confirmed by Russian Minister of Defense, that this is over. The story for Moskva, for this flagship, is over, and this is a great victory for Ukrainian army. Let's make a focus on that, because this is the biggest warship in Russian fleet, the biggest one, the most powerful. It is a kind of a symbol of Russian army, and it was based in Crimea, in this annexed occupied peninsula, starting from 2014. And it is very, very well known from the first days of this war, when that very flagship approached Zmyny, Ukrainian territory, and saying that here Russian military warship. So you just and he received the answer. It received the answer from Ukrainian officers stating that go fuck yourself. Russian military ship. And now if we traveled a lot with you in Ukraine, and everywhere on every boat you can see these famous phrases, famous slogan. It became a kind of very symbolic I don't know how to say, logo maybe of Ukrainian resistance, so about this Russian warship. So, and now it comes true, and let's underline that it happened for the 50th day of Ukrainian resistance against this Russian aggression. So once again, quite a symbolic gesture. And what we've also observed in the first hours is that Russian ships were trying to get back to Crimea coast, just to be quite far away from Ukrainian coast. This is important because it was a kind of a important humiliation for Russian fleet and for Russian army, because they were very proud of this warship, and they were extremely proud of their fleet. And now they are kind of I don't know how to describe their feelings, but some Telegram channels saying that Putin was very angry about that.
We don't know whether these
exactly.
Telegram channels are saying the truth or not. We try to use the content by Telegram channels, we at Ukraine World, only if it's visual content. So if we see that there's a particular photo taken from a particular place, for example, we base a lot on photos and videos about Mariupol, right? Because the witnesses are sending these photos. But of course, we understand the Telegram channels, pro-Russian, anti-Russian, doesn't matter. They do not usually spread verified information. But the truth is that Well, the paradox is that this warship, Moskva, was actually built in Mykolaiv,
Yeah, that's what
in
I was.
today's Ukraine, in late 70s, early 20s, early 80s, right?
So Ukrainians just hit their own vessel. So at least a vessel constructed many years ago in Mykolaiv, and Mykolaiv was bombed in recent days many times, and in the recent weeks many times. Now Russian troops are quite away from Mykolaiv, but once again. Why this is important? Because they were sending missiles from this warship to the whole territory of Ukraine, to Kiev and maybe even to Lviv and even to Ivano-Frankivsk region. So they were able to hit many aims on the whole territory. And some experts say we are unable to verify that information, but some experts, military experts, are stating that maybe there were even 2 nuclear missiles on this boat. This is not clear at that moment, but we cannot exclude that because it was one of the biggest ship. So maybe some nuclear threat is already over for
Did they explode these nuclear bombs?
Hopefully not, because there were no evidence of that. But there were explosion, but it was a partial explosion, and then it sank. So let's hope. We are not sure of anything, but I've read at least 2 military experts saying that it is possible, and according to official description of ammunition present on this warship, we cannot exclude that at least.
And let's also give the background. What's happening in the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov? So after Russians occupied Crimea in 2014, they started claiming that, of course, the territories around Crimea are the waters are Russian waters. Then they gradually annexed the Sea of Azov. So they not letting Ukrainian ships going there, and now they're basically controlling the Black Sea, and they are blocking Ukrainian ports. So some of the very important Ukrainian ports are occupied by Russians, like Berdyansk or Mariupol. Well, Mariupol is, as we know, the city that practically no longer exists. And Mykolaiv is blocked. Odessa, also one of the most important ports. Ships can probably go away from Odessa, but then they will, face the Russian warships.
Yeah, they're just transforming this sea, this Black Sea, and also Azov Sea into a kind of a lake, so Russian lake. So what we were claiming for many months and even years already, specifically during last months, they were trying to transform these seas into lakes, Russian lakes. So, and this is important economically also for Ukraine. What you just developed. So speaking about ports are important for Ukraine not only as military bases and not specifically as military bases, but as economic opportunities. So, and when we speak now about huge losses of Ukrainian huge losses in economy, it is mainly linked to the fact that we cannot export, agricultural production abroad via our ports.
Exactly, and this also harms the global economy because Ukraine is a very important supplier of agricultural goods worldwide, and therefore international organizations are now talking about the possible crisis, food security crisis in Africa, in Asia, on other continents, because Ukraine is important for the world, has been important throughout its history because of its lands, because of its earth, because of its agricultural capacity, etc. So this shows the global importance of Ukraine. And Russians are blocking the Black Sea. Black Sea is not their waters by any means. Black Sea is also the sea where 3 NATO countries are having their coasts: Bulgaria, Romania, and Turkey. And why international community does not unblock the Black Sea? Why, for example, there are no NATO ships coming into the Black Sea, showing that Russians do not have a right to be there?
Yeah, they try to avoid maybe this kind of direct clash, with Russian army. But what is important now is that about Turkey. Turkey is actually blocking several other Russian warships, and they cannot get back to Black Sea. This is important for us because these warships, they have a lot of missiles as well, but they cannot reach to Ukrainian territory at that very moment. So Turkey is doing some important things for us because it was the biggest warship, but not the only one. But what is important to underline at the same time that this warship was destroyed by Ukrainian system called Neptun. It was under construction for many, many, many years, starting from 2014, and the idea was born in 2014 at that very moment when Crimea was annexed. So the idea was to protect Ukrainian territory from Russian warship, in the Black Sea, and it took many years to construct. And we followed a lot of stories about that, because they needed a lot of money for that. And finally, it was approved and tested in January 2022. So just 2 months, let us say 2 months before the war started. And so this is the first time this Neptun was used, and it's successfully used. And so this is really a kind of victory. I would say this is not NATO. It's not coming from NATO like any other weapons is coming in mass. Maybe today, we hope. We don't know exactly, but a lot of announcement and clarifications were made about United States, what they are delivering, some other countries. But this is important to say that this is specifically Ukraine against Russia, and Ukraine has shown that we are capable to destroy their warship just with our homemade systems. This is a great victory.
Yes, and let's not forget that Ukrainians are really getting more arms from the West. There was a recent information about many items coming from the United States. So I think time for Russia becomes much more difficult right now. Yes,
and I think this is important that it was for the very first time when this supply was made public. So that everybody was able to read what is really inside, and this is a kind of a public gesture, very important, showing that United States are not afraid to show what is being delivered, because during the first months of this war, we observed a lot of hidden information saying that we try to avoid at all price any direct clash with Russia. So if we supply arms, we keep it secret for them not to be angry with us, because Russians were saying that we will attack any kind of place where these NATO weapons are coming. So, and now I think this is a kind of symbolic importance of that. So we are not afraid. So it's NATO countries saying we are not afraid to say publicly what we are delivering here. It's your turn to be afraid of what is going to happen. And I think it's important because it shows that their awareness about the sense, the meaning of this war is becoming a kind of more clear now, not only for Ukraine, but also for our Western partners. So this is a clear war, and you have to take a side in this war. And if you supply arms, it means that you are already in the conflict. And I think that this kind of political gestures is linked to the fact that the estimation for use of nuclear missiles is diminishing. So because of many reasons, maybe, but the West, NATO is. I have an impression, I may be mistaken, but I have an impression is less afraid of Putin now than 1 month ago.
Let's quote some figures. Initially, figures that are showing the capacity of Ukrainian army. Traditionally, we name the figures which are expressed, which are given by Ukraine's defense ministry. Of course, these figures can be put into question sometimes, but we understand that there is very little capacity to verify, although there are some projects that are verifying these figures, and sometimes there are less, for example, lesser numbers, but we quoted several such projects in our previous episodes. So Ukrainians are saying that the number of Russian soldiers, Russian personnel that Russians lost is already 20,000, and it's a huge number. Also, Ukrainians destroyed 756 tanks, 144 helicopters, 163 aircrafts, 366 artillery systems, 8 boats, 1,500 of vehicles, 76 fuel tanks, and about 2,000 armored vehicles, etc. So you can check on our Twitter the exact numbers.
And what is linked to that, to losses, I mean human losses in the Russian army, is that yesterday, for example, I saw this advertisement in Moscow metro, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe it happened in Moscow, in metro, that's for sure, but we are not sure if it was in Moscow or some other city. Advertisement about calling for people who would like to join Russian army, and the slogan was, "It's my business," and for short-term contracts. So they were appealing for people for short-term contracts, and surely enough, Ukrainians were kidding that during all day long yesterday, because surely enough for Ukrainians, any kind of military entering our territories for short-term stay, in fact, because a lot of them are dying here, and clearly enough, that's not for long stay.
Yeah, there are lots of memes, lots of kind of humor around this war, interestingly enough, which also shows this Ukrainian attitude to this, because of course there are lots of inhumane sufferings, but Ukrainians also very often reacting with dark black humor on this. Let's quote also some very sad figures, actually announced by Ukrainian Ombudswoman Lyudmila Denisova about basically homeless Ukrainians. So how many Ukrainians lost their homes? And the number is just huge. It's 200,000. It's all over 200,000. 219,600. That's the number of Ukrainians who lost their homes. Just imagine. I mean.
Lost in terms that their homes are destroyed.
Yes, exactly. And it's 5.3 million square meters. Total housing size destroyed. Over 5 million square meters. So far, 76,000 Ukrainians applied for a state compensation. I don't know what the state compensation will look like, frankly. I mean, Ukraine is not that rich country that will supply everybody who lost their homes with a new apartment. I really doubt this. But out of 200,000, there is 76,000 people who applied for state compensation, and 3,600 cultural heritage sites destroyed.
Look how. So it's 200,000.
219,000 Ukrainians lost their homes.
People or families? Because
people.
Because look, if we talk about Mariupol, what we know for sure, let's be careful with these figures. They were 400,000 before the war, and all these people have lost their homes.
Well, we don't know. We actually
don't know. Maybe it's without Mariupol. I don't know, because if you look, so Mariupol is not a place to live. Volodymyr Zelensky, president of Ukraine, communicated yesterday that according to official information, only 95% of housing is destroyed in the city. So you can they've just erased the whole city. So at least 400,000 have lost their homes. Maybe there is a possibility for reconstruction. We don't know exactly how it looks like, for all the, but I doubt that there is any possibility to leave. For example, if the war starts tomorrow, imagine, so that the people will be able to come back. This is just not imaginable.
Yeah, so these figures will be much higher, actually. This is what we have, confirmed figure from the ombudswoman, but maybe, the number of Ukrainians who lost their homes will reach 500,000, million people, right? Actually, this is the figures that we have now, but it certainly will increase. And Mariupol, actually, yeah, the tragedy, inhumane tragedy of this city is that we still, we know what is going on, but most probably Russians are just erasing the traces of their atrocities. Therefore, there is this news about mobile crematoriums, and we know that we're publishing photos on our Twitter about collective graves of people just near the streets. People are just burying their dead.
And what is also happening in Mariupol, and what was communicated yesterday officially by Ukrainian side, is about these forced deportations. What they claim, they say at least 45,000 people deported by force from Donetsk and Lugansk regions, so from the east, and 70,000 people deported by force from Mariupol only. So imagine a city of 400,000 people and 70,000 already deported to Russia. And what we are already reading in press, testimonies of several people who escaped Russia after being deported there, and they tell the whole story. They tell about these so-called filtration, I don't know how you say, filtration camps, where you are interviewed, and according to estimations, about 5% of people, mainly men and pro-Ukrainian, I know openly pro-Ukrainian people, they do not pass the check, and they eliminated, I don't know, killed or whatever, maybe imprisoned. And children, women, and elderly people, they do travel to Russia, to many different regions. So this is about forced deportation.
Let's read some of the testimonies. We continue collecting the testimonies of people. You can see them on our Twitter under the hashtag UkraineWorld testimony. And we're also publishing the testimonies on our website, UkraineWorld.org. So a few testimonies I would like to read to you from Kyiv, both from Kyiv region. One is from Alona, who described her parents' house in a village located between Bucha and Borodyanka. They were lucky to escape on March 10th, and after a month, the father of this Alona came back to home. So neighbors told him that 5 Russian tanks parked right in our garden, and many of the Russians were living in our home. The Ukrainian military thinks that it was a hub for Chechens from Kadyrov's army. The house remains intact, though the Russians have stolen everything they could carry and destroyed my parents' home inside and out. Their tanks smashed plants, trees, and flowers in our garden. They burned books and my daughter's paintings. They trampled over the furniture with their boots on. They nailed a patchwork blanket to a wall with a knife to cover the ruined glass of the terrace doors. They rummaged through all the drawers and wardrobes. Furthermore, they also carved the letter V on a knife, with a knife on a kitchen cabinet. So this is the testimony. Of course, not the most horrible one, but maybe something which is very typical for people who are coming back to their houses and then see, for example, the traces of the stay of Russian army. Another testimony that we've published, it's already on our website, UkraineWorld.org. It's a diary by Bogdana, who also from Kyiv Oblast. She was doing her diary from 24th of February until 8th of April. And just a few probably excerpts from this diary. Columns of Russian military equipment are going to Kyiv. We are scared. We are praying like never before in our lives 2 people were shot near the village just because they are Ukrainians. I never even thought that such cruelty is possible nowadays. I'm beginning to understand my grandmother who never went to see the fireworks because it reminded her of the war. Neighbors' children came up with a game called Beat Putin. Beating Putin is an honor. Nobody wants to be Putin, so they appoint some inanimate object as Putin and beat it until the knuckles are bloody with hatred that children should not have. We are tired, physically and morally. The occupiers claim that they will win soon. They say that they need to be patient, we need to be patient, and that we will have Russian peace. This is what we are all most afraid of. Today, those who laughed at the fact that I met floor and digging up their last bags of wheat are digging up their last bags of wheat. People are preparing for a long occupation. We have learned to churn butter, bake bread, and appreciate life and the people around us. The occupiers are demanding from us prostitutes, wheat, chicken, and milk. Young girls try not to go out alone. Since the beginning of the war, women of all ages try not to look bright or presentable. We are scared. So you can find this longer diary on our website, and of course we see the reports about the rapes, numerous rapes.
Unfortunately, the numbers are high, and what is important to understand that the real number is much higher than it is reported, because this is not a thing that you will declare the first day you are liberated, because this is a kind of thing. But unfortunately, not only women and not even girls, but even girls. I mean, we received information about 11 years old, 9 years old. So all these atrocities. So they will be responding for that one day. We are almost sure. And importantly enough, yesterday, Ukrainian Parliament officially recognized Russian aggression as genocide. This is important. This is a political decision, sure, but this is important for somebody to start. So we start this campaign saying that this is a genocide, at least locally in what was happening in Mariupol or in other cities which were occupied. So they were really killing Ukrainians for being Ukrainians. If you read with the program texts, like that one text we discussed already at the state site RIA Novosti, so they're talking about the Ukrainization of Ukraine. For them, being Ukrainian means not to be humane. So you can do whatever you want with Ukrainians because they are simply not like you. So on what they are really doing.
And we got lots of interceptions by SBU, Ukrainian Security Service. And one of the interceptions that we published on our Twitter, it's a talk between a wife of Russian soldier and this Russian soldier, in which she allows him to rape Ukrainian women. And it's a conversation where she laughs. And she says, you can rape Ukrainian women, but without telling me. And just use condoms.
Just don't tell me about it.
Don't tell me. But I have an impression that this kind of women would be proud to tell her, other women, female friends, or somewhere in Russia, that her husband raped Ukrainian women in numbers, and this is the tonality of this conversation.
We'll discover a lot of these truths, maybe months or years after the war will be over. There is no doubt that we don't know maybe the huge part of these atrocities, because we get to know that when Ukrainian villages and cities are liberated, not cities, because villages and small towns are liberated. So unfortunately, we will get to know all this later. And we'll discuss all that later. We can only imagine what is happening now in villages in the east which are occupied, and what is happening in Mariupol. Let's talk maybe it's important, maybe the last thing about Mariupol, military aspect. There are a lot of rumors saying that, at least Russians are saying every day, they say that Mariupol is already Russian. But at that very moment, we do know that there are still Ukrainian troops inside, Azov battalion and other Ukrainian troops. They are together. They control a part of the city. We don't know exactly at that moment which part and how big is this part, but they are still there. They are not receiving a lot of aid from exterior because this is simply impossible. But this is important, not only just to keep the control over the Mariupol, but important just to keep busy all these 10,000 Russian troops which are busy with Mariupol, so they cannot attack in Donbass, they cannot try to do something else. So from that point of view, this heroic, without any exaggeration, heroic resistance of Mariupol has already saved 1 month, more than 1 month, already time for Ukrainians to prepare for this bigger attack in Donbass. And we will never be enough grateful for these defenders of Mariupol. I mean, all Ukrainians. We cannot overestimate the importance of their resistance.
And let's be clear. I mean, the big number of those defenders are from Azov. This battalion, this formation of Ukrainian army, which had so much, I don't know how to call it, criticism, black PR, whatever, calling them neo-Nazis, etc., quite often without really going into detail what this word neo-Nazi mean. And now these are people who are heroically defending Mariupol against this really fascist neo-Nazi state. Because, I mean, this concept, I don't want to go into details, but the concept of neo-Nazism, it presumes that there is a state architecture behind you, and only with this state architecture you can build a really totalitarian regime. But that's another story. We probably will discuss it later. Maybe final remarks about disinformation and propaganda. We are monitoring it very, very regularly on UkraineWorld's website. And what can we say? It was interesting. Our partners from Text.org.ua spotted that the word Nazi, we know that Russians are dehumanizing Ukrainians and calling that all Ukrainians are Nazis, etc. Not only Azov battalion, but Ukrainians are passive Nazis and should also all be exterminated. And it's important that since 24th of February, there was a huge spike in this usage of this term. So, of course, Russian state TV and propagandist channels were using this term very regularly. But suddenly from the 24th, it's just increased dramatically. And our partners spotted several dozens of the mentions up until 80 mentions per day on some key news outlets. And it seems that they're talking about Nazis all the time in their news about Ukraine. And this is also a very important part of the strategy of dehumanizing. Also, they're blaming the West, and for example, Maria Zakharova, the famous spokesperson of Russia's foreign ministry, said that the quote, collective West took a demonstrative stance against us. They accuse us of creating crisis and try to punish us politically. So the message is that it's not our fault. We were dragged into the war. It's all the West's fault. Also, Russian media are saying that Russia fights against the West. Quote, the West does not hide that it is at war with us. The West doesn't fight on its territory, nor with its own hands, meaning that Ukrainians are just, marionettes, pawns of the West. Lenta.ru writes that the EU elites openly use Ukrainian citizens as their pawns. Washington does not have efficient international diplomacy, and there is very weak anti-war movement in the country. Well, what about Russia, by the way? Anti-war movement. I continue the quote from Lenta.ru. These and other factors have put the world on the brink of a nuclear catastrophe. So the idea that we're just innocent. We are not committing crimes in Bucha, in Mariupol. We were dragged into the war. It's all the West's fault. It's incredible how they're twisting everything. And I just don't have words to
And the
describe it.
consequences are quite clear, because there are a lot of normal people. I mean, ordinary people. They do believe this kind of propaganda. They're saying our soldiers are defending. They are defending Ukrainians. They are in Ukraine, and so they justify all. So, and these Nazis, Ukrainian Nazis, are killing people and all that. So this is kind of misunderstanding. So, and the consequences are huge, because there are millions behind. There are millions who believe this propaganda, and it will take, I don't know how much time to understand what was happening in Ukraine. But we do know this day will come, and all the atrocities and all the crimes of Russian regime will be clear for everybody, and Russian citizens will be announced responsible. I mean, for what their government is doing now, and not only this generation, but also the next generation, because they will pay. We do hope now that even financially, this is important, just to impose this burden to pay for all the destructions they made in Ukraine, because it's only 1 month and a half of this war, and already a lot of things are destroyed. But if the war goes on, we can imagine how they can transform the whole country into a ruin.
Let's hope they will not succeed in doing that, and that Ukrainians will be victorious, and Ukrainians have shown that they can be victorious against the Russians, but we need more support from international community, more sanctions, closing the loopholes in sanctions, and more weapons to counteract and counterattack. This was a UkraineWorld podcast explaining Ukraine. We're making this podcast together from Internews Ukraine and Ukraine Crisis Media Center. My name is Volodymyr Yermolenko. I'm chief editor of UkraineWorld.org, and I'm joined by Tetyana Ogarkova, who is in charge of international outreach at Ukraine Crisis Media Center. You can support us at patreon.com/UkraineWorld. Stay with us and stand with Ukraine.